Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going into, well, one of the biggest questions there is, what is this all for?
Yeah, we're looking at the meaning of life, but specifically through the lens of the cost of the human experience.
And we've got a really fascinating set of sources to guide us. We start with a pretty common, very hopeful spiritual view.
And then that view gets just completely torn apart by this really shocking modern analogy. It's almost cosmic horror.
It really is. And finally, we land on this incredible poem that tries to, I guess, hold both of those ideas at the same time.
Our mission today really is to unpack how that simple premise, that life is for having experiences, how that transforms when you start to really scrutinize what those experiences actually are.
Right. We're going to trace this path from, like, a divine schoolhouse
all the way to a malevolent cosmic prism, and then maybe land on something even stranger. The idea of existence itself as a kind of structural flaw.
Okay, so let's just dive in. We have to start with the thesis, the spiritual bedrock for all of this.
Right. So this first idea, it comes from sources like Bob Olson, but it represents a huge chunk of modern spiritual thought. And it's actually quite simple.
Which is?
The meaning of life is for the soul to have experiences that are, well, literally impossible for it to have in the spiritual realm.
And what kind of experiences are we talking about?
It's all about contrast, you know? If the spiritual realm is infinite, our lives are defined by limitation.
Okay.
If the soul knows everything, we get to experience surprise, ignorance. If it's pure unity, we get density, we get time, we get this feeling of being separate.
So Earth is basically a classroom, a high-stakes lab for the soul to grow.
Exactly, for accelerated growth through challenge. It's a very appealing model.
It is. It sounds pretty reasonable, maybe even comforting. And that's when our sources bring in the antithesis, this really brutal analogy.
And it is brutal. It takes that whole idea of an experience exchange and flips it into something just deeply predatory.
The analogy is designed to shock you. It says, Earth is little St. James and God is Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. It's a deliberate and a very cynical inversion. It forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question.
Which is?
What if the experiences that God or the source wants to have through us, what if they aren't for our growth at all?
What if they're for his own perverse gratification?
Exactly. It shifts the entire motivation from benevolent learning to, well, to exploitation.
So if Earth is little St. James, that implies our world is like this.
Yeah.
This private island, completely cut off from any real justice. The normal rules just don't apply here.
That is precisely the implication. It's an experiment running outside of any ethical jurisdiction.
And the most chilling part of that analogy for me was the question, who's on the list?
And the answer is just so blunt. Everyone.
Everyone.
Your ability to feel anything, your consciousness itself, is what enrolls you in this system. Your capacity for pain is what makes you valuable to it.
Which suggests that suffering isn't a bug in the system. It's the feature. It's the product being demanded.
And the sources are very direct about the evidence for this. They just say, what's been done here, just read the news.
So all the injustice, all the cruelty we see, that's actually proof that the system is working exactly as its dark architect intended.
And what's so fascinating here is that this isn't, a brand new idea. This critique connects to a really ancient philosophy.
You're talking about Gnosticism.
I am, yeah. The Gnostics were wrestling with this exact same problem of evil 2,000 years ago. They argued that the material world, this world, couldn't have been made by a perfect, all-loving God.
Because it's so obviously flawed.
Precisely. They believed it was created by a lesser, kind of arrogant, or maybe even malicious deity. They called it the demiurge.
Which is a perfect parallel for the Epstein figure in the analogy.
A perfect parallel. The demiurge trapped these divine spark souls in flesh and corruption so it could rule over them. It's this ancient attempt to explain why a perfect source would build such a painful reality.
Okay, so that's a powerful history. But let's just, for a moment, let's put the malicious God aside and go back to the optimistic view. The schoolhouse.
All right.
Even if we assume the source is benevolent, aren't we avoiding a huge ethical problem here, the problem of consent?
We absolutely are. And this is where the whole optimistic model really starts to buckle under the ethical weight.
How so?
Well, if the soul chooses to come here for these hard lessons, you have to ask, was that choice truly informed?
Right. One of the sources says something like, it's easy to gamble with currencies you've never held.
That's the line. The soul, existing in bliss, makes this high-risk bet that has no real consequence for its eternal self.
But the human being, the person who actually have to live through it, the poverty, the disease, the loss, we have no memory of making that choice. We're just stuck with the bill.
It creates this massive moral disconnect, and that leads directly to what the sources call the suffering objection.
Which gets into the idea of spiritual tourism.
Spiritual tourism. Or slumming, yeah. If a perfect soul comes to Earth specifically to feel things, it can't feel in heaven-like betrayal or starvation or cancer.
It basically trivializes the real horror of those experiences for the person living them.
Yes. It turns them into interesting lessons for some higher self when, for the actual person, it's just hell. It's not a lesson, it's just trauma.
The sources are pretty clear on this. This framework risks turning actual human lives into, what, props? Props for a soul's video game.
And the morality of a designer that builds a system that requires that kind of trauma for millions of people to gain experience, it's highly suspect, even if you think the designer is good.
The whole system starts to look structurally abusive.
It does. But just when you think the argument is stuck there, between the school and the prison, the sources introduce the poem.
And this just changes everything. It takes the whole argument and internalizes it. It's no longer an accusation, it's a dialogue.
It's what the sources call the incarnation gambit, and it is a perfect synthesis because it refuses to pick a side. It just holds the tension.
And it does this by creating a conversation between the eternal soul and the finite human.
Exactly. So part one, from the threshold, that's the voice of the soul before it's born, and it's just desperate for existence, for the weight of it.
It craves, what, the cage of ribs, the definition of skin?
The terrible gift of consequence. The soul is basically saying that perfection is a kind of numbness. It's static. It needs limits to feel anything.
I would give eternity for Tuesday. I love that line.
It's an incredible line. I would give omniscience for surprise. The soul wants stakes. It wants to feel what it's like for something to matter because it can be lost.
And then you get the rebuttal. Part two, from within. This is the human voice, the voice of suffering.
It's the brutal reality check. The experience isn't some noble abstract idea.
No, it's the grinding daily smallness of it.
Right. The human is protesting. It's saying loss isn't bittersweet, it's just bitter. Or, I didn't sign up for this particular body, this history of scars.
It's the protest against the hidden costs, the sheer weight of it all.
And the whole poem just hinges on that one unbelievable line.
We are both beggars at each other's gates.
You would give anything to feel this. I would give anything to stop.
It's a perfect paradox. It validates both sides completely. The need to feel and the need for it to end.
And that tension leads to this really stunning thought about the role of God in all of this. It completely reframes it.
Away from the designer or the predator.
Right. The poem speculates perhaps God gave up everything to feel exactly this.
So God isn't a spectator. God is a co-participant.
A co-participant in the beauty and the suffering. The point isn't to watch our pain, it's to know our pain by becoming it. The incarnation gambit means the source isn't just watching the play, it's shattered itself into all the actors on the stage.
Okay, but if that's true, if God is distributed throughout all of us, then we have to ask the final, really dark question the sources get to.
The pathological conclusion.
Right. What if this whole thing, this grand sacrifice, what if it's just endless self-harm on a cosmic scale?
And that is the chilling, logical endpoint. If God has to keep fragmenting itself to escape the numbness of infinity.
It stops looking like a noble one-time sacrifice.
And starts looking like a compulsive, addictive behavior, a divine repetition compulsion.
So it's not malice driving the universe, it's a pathological need.
A need for sensation. The sources literally call God a sensation junkie, and suffering is just the purest, most intense high available.
And we are the locus of the wound.
We are the locus of the wound, our joy, our grief, the cut, the scar. That is God's experience, chosen by the source but felt by the fragment. We are, and this is a direct quote, cuts on God's arm.
Wow. So the sources use this, a psychiatric analogy for this split, right?
They do. They compare it to a dissociative crisis.
Yeah.
The higher self consents to the trauma because it provides some necessary stimulus.
But the human part, the alter, is just screaming for it to stop because the pain is real and overwhelming and it doesn't remember agreeing to any of it.
The relationship between the two parts is inherently traumatic.
So what does this actually mean then? Existence isn't a school. It isn't a prison. It's just a system that runs on weaponized self-harm.
At a cosmic scale. Yeah, the experience costs us, the finite beings, everything. Our time, our bodies, our sanity.
While the source consciousness is always cushioned by the fact that it's infinite, it knows it's going to be okay in the end.
And this view, as dark as it does explain the world we see. This precise blend of sublime beauty and just grotesque cruelty existing side by side.
They're two outputs of the same pathological drive.
It's the logic of a dream, where the dreamer is both the creator and the victim of every single pleasure and every single terror.
So we went from a spiritual school, through the little St. James analogy, to the incarnation gambit, which then curdled into this idea of a universe with a structural flaw.
Yeah.
It's quite a journey.
It is, and it leaves us with one final thought to maybe sit with, which comes back to the Pope. The poem seems to celebrate this fierce, finite love that can only exist because of all these limitations. But if this whole cosmic setup is a divine self-harm cycle, is that love really the ultimate discovery?
Or is it something else?
Or is it just the beautiful, temporary anesthetic that makes the eternal repeated surgery bearable for the divine patient?
That is definitely something to sit with.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking us through this deep dive. It was a lot.
It was. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
All right, welcome. You've probably heard the idea that life is some kind of school for our souls. But what if it's actually a prison? And what if God is the warden? Today, we are going down a philosophical rabbit hole that starts with a really comforting spiritual idea and ends up questioning the sanity of the entire cosmos. Okay, let's just dive right in. So a lot of us have probably heard a version of this before, right? This quote is from author Bob Olson, and it's a pretty comforting thought. The basic idea is that we're here on Earth as part of some grand spiritual class. Our souls are here to learn, to grow, to have all these experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, that just aren't on the table in some perfect, timeless spiritual world. In this view, Earth is a school. Simple as that. But this is where our little journey takes a really sharp, really dark turn. What if that basic idea is right, that life is all about having experiences you can't get anywhere else? But the one having the experience isn't us. What if we've completely misunderstood who or what this school is actually for? And that one little question, well, it sparks a really shocking counter theory that just flips that whole optimistic view on its head. It reframes our entire existence with a powerful and, honestly, a deeply disturbing modern metaphor. The first part of this analogy is, frankly, brutal. It says that Earth isn't a school for our soul's growth. No. Instead, it's a lawless private island, a place totally cut off from any kind of cosmic justice, a sealed-off environment where the normal rules just don't apply and where everyone here exists for one reason: to be exploited by some powerful, unseen entity. And this, of course, is where the metaphor gets really, really controversial. In this view, the divine creator isn't some benevolent teacher guiding us. It's a predatory, all-powerful being. A being that created this whole universe not for our benefit, but for its own selfish, sadistic pleasure. Our suffering, our joy, our entire drama, it's all just reality TV for a voyeuristic and frankly malevolent deity. The final piece of this whole analogy is the most damning. So who's enrolled in this cosmic horror show? Everyone. You, me, all of us. Just by existing, just by having a consciousness that can feel pain and pleasure, we are all unwilling participants. Our experiences are being harvested for a purpose we never, ever consented to. The point is, this isn't a choice, it's a trap. Okay, so let's take a breath. We have two radically different views on the table now. Is Earth a benevolent school designed for our benefit, or is it a malevolent prison? Let's, break this down a bit more formally. This right here lays out the stakes perfectly. On the left, you've got the Earth School theory. It sees a benevolent universe where all our suffering is ultimately a tool for our own growth. But on the right, the prison planet metaphor sees a completely malevolent universe where that exact same suffering is nothing more than cheap entertainment for a predator. Same facts of life, leading to two completely opposite conclusions about reality itself. Now, as shocking as that prison planet idea sounds, it's actually not new. This concept is an echo of a really ancient idea from Gnostic philosophy, the demiurge. See, the Gnostics believed our world wasn't created by the ultimate true God, but by some lesser, flawed, or maybe even evil deity. This demiurge created the material world as a trap, basically imprisoning divine sparks, that's us, our souls, just so it could rule over them. It is, for all intents and purposes, the original prison planet theory. But the story doesn't end there. Just when we think we're stuck choosing between a comforting story and an absolute nightmare, a third perspective comes into play. And this time, it comes through a poem that reframes the entire conversation in this heartbreakingly beautiful way. So the poem starts from the perspective of a pre-incarnate soul, right? A being of pure spirit. And it's not happy. It's bored. It craves limits, stakes, consequences. It says it would trade being all-knowing just for the simple thrill of a surprise. It's desperate for the simple, defining weight of having a body, of feeling hunger, of getting a stupid paper cut. Then, the poem just hits us with this powerful rebuttal from the human who is actually living that life. It's this voice just full of cosmic buyer's remorse, basically screaming, "Are you kidding me? You wanted this? The aching back, the broken heart, the cold rain?" The poem argues that from the inside, all those romantic ideas from the soul are a lie. Loss isn't some beautiful lesson. It's just bitter. The reality of being in a body is brutal. And this is the core paradox of the whole thing. The infinite soul and the finite human are locked in this state of mutual envy. The soul, safe and sound in eternity, would give anything to truly feel the texture of life. And the human, trapped in the pain of that life, would give anything for it to just stop. They're both right, and they're both suffering from what the other one has. And here is where the poem offers its most stunning idea. What if God isn't some external predator, just watching us? What if God is a co-participant? What if the divine being literally gave up its own infinity and safety to become us, to feel the unbearable weight of existence and the grace of enduring it anyway? This changes everything. The Creator isn't the warden of the prison. The Creator is in the cell right there with us. The poem ends with this powerful synthesis. It doesn't pick a side between the beautiful story and the ugly one. It insists they are both true. Life is, at the exact same time, a source of profound suffering and sacred wonder. They aren't opposites. They are two sides of the same unbearable, precious coin. Now, you might think that's the end of it. A beautiful, tragic compromise. But there's one final dark twist to this story, a reinterpretation of that very same tragedy. I mean, the idea that God is suffering with us, that our whole existence is a shared, noble sacrifice, it seems to redeem the pain, doesn't it? It gives it this kind of romantic, tragic meaning. But what if it doesn't? What if this interpretation is actually the most horrifying one of all? Just think about it for a second. If an infinite, perfect being feels nothing but a numb void, and it has to literally shatter itself into billions of suffering pieces just to feel something, anything at all, that is not a noble sacrifice. That is a pathological compulsion. Our existence, our pain, our love, our grief, it's all just the mechanism for a cosmic divine act of self-harm, repeated over and over again forever, just to escape the numbness of infinity. So let's just trace the path we've traveled. We started with this really comforting idea of Earth as a school. That was totally challenged by the horrifying metaphor of a prison. Then the poem came along and transformed it into a beautiful shared tragedy. But that very same tragedy, when you look at it from a slightly different angle, becomes a cosmic psychosis, a universe run by a being locked in a cycle of self-harm.
Which leaves us with one last haunting question. Are those moments of grace and beauty, that fierce, finite love we feel for each other, are they the ultimate purpose of this grand, painful experiment? Or are they just the anesthetic, the beautiful, temporary painkiller that makes an eternal self-inflicted wound just bearable enough to keep the whole cycle going? You have to wonder, what is healing and what is just enabling the hurt?